Good evening, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this very special occasion as we celebrate the centennial anniversary of the TCU College of Education. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Frank Hernandez, and I have the honor of serving as the Dean of the College of Education here at TCU. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to recognize and thank our TCU leadership, Board of Trustees, our College of Education Board of Visitors, donors, faculty, staff, alumni, and students. Many of you are here tonight, have held several of these roles over the years, and we are incredibly grateful for your generous support. Each of your contributions has given life to our mission and delivered impact to our campus, community, and beyond. Thank you for all of that work. Tonight marks a pivotal moment in our history as we not only reflect on 100 years of academic excellence and community impact, but also look at the exciting future that lies ahead for education. Over the past century, the College of Education has built a legacy of preparing exceptional leaders, educators, and innovators who have shaped educational practices and positively impacted countless lives. We are incredibly proud of our history, but just as excited about what's to come. Our commitment to fostering innovation, ethical leadership, and relentless curiosity remains as strong as ever as we prepare for the next 100 years. For tonight's program, we are fortunate to be joined by two remarkable leaders who have exemplified what it means to lead with vision and purpose. Through their conversation, we'll explore the future of education, leadership, and the power of community shaping what comes next. I would like to share a bit more about them before inviting them to the stage. First, it is my privilege to introduce our university's leader, a visionary in his own right, President Daniel W. Pullin, who I call as my president. Since becoming TCU's president, Daniel has been at the forefront of ensuring our university continues to innovate as a leader in education, not just in Texas, but nationally and globally. Formerly the John V. Roach Dean of the TCU Neely School of Business, President Pullin blends nearly 20 years of higher education experience with an early foundation in world-renowned business organizations to support and advance TCU's mission. His unwavering commitment to innovation, excellence, and student success has helped to shape TCU's vision for the future. Under his leadership, the university continues to thrive, pushing boundaries and expanding our academic reach. Tonight, he will help guide a conversation that reflects on the extraordinary career of our distinguished guest and explores the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for higher education. Now it is my distinct honor to introduce our guest for this evening, Dr. Ruth J. Simmons. Dr. Simmons is, without question, one of the most highly regarded and respected leaders in higher education today, and is an extraordinary privilege to have her with us. Dr. Simmons has spent more than 50 years dedicating her life to education, serving as a beacon of leadership and a champion for equity, access, and excellence. As a former president of Brown University, Smith College, and Prairie View A&M University, she has blazed trails in every role that she's held, including becoming the first African-American president of an Ivy League university. Her commitment to ensuring that education opens doors for all students, regardless of their background, has had a profound and lasting impact on our world. Among her many accolades, Dr. Simmons is the recipient of the 2022 National Humanities Medal, awarded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, which she formally received from President Biden at the White House earlier this week. She also has received numerous honors such as the Fulbright Lifetime Achievement Medal, the Eleanor Roosevelt Val Kill Medal, and the Foreign Policy Association Medal. She is recognized for her groundbreaking leadership with prestigious titles and honorary degrees from some of the world's top institutions. But perhaps what stands out most about Dr. Simmons is her dedication to mentorship and her unwavering belief in the transformational power of education. In 2023, she published her New York Times bestseller memoir, Up Home, a deeply personal account of education's impact on her life. Currently, she continues to guide the next generation of leaders as a President's Distinguished Fellow at Rice University and advisor to the President of Harvard on its HBCU initiative. Tonight, we are fortunate to hear her wisdom as she shares her thoughts and insights on leadership, education, and the important role of institutions like TCU and its College of Education and the ways in which they are shaping the future. Please join me in welcoming TCU President Daniel Pullin and extraordinary leader, educator, and advocate, Dr. Ruth J. Simmons.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this memorable moment in the life and times of the College of Education. It's really been such a jewel in TCU's crown over the years, and to share 100 years of excellence and another 100 years of promise is certainly my joy. And it's only appropriate that that type of impact is celebrated by one of the great thought leaders over the last 50 years in higher education. I'm not a mathematician, but you've made an impact on a lot of people in a lot of ways for a long time, and we just want to say thank you for bringing higher education along and giving all of us a chance to build upon the foundation that you are continuing to layer on top of. Dean Hernandez, thank you for your leadership. You've been here just a few short years, but you've already made a difference, and I love the way you think in bold strokes. I love the way you're aligning this school with the aspirations of the institution, the way you collaborate across colleges, and as important as anything, the way you have a very forward emphasis on the impact a university can make on a community, right, in a lasting way. So it's an appropriate moment to have a great dialogue. And since we're talking about great leaders, let's maybe just jump right into leadership style. Talk to us about your leadership style, maybe as it is today, how it's evolved over the years. Certainly, you've made an impact. I was reading not too long ago this article on the Campus Crusader, America's best college president, and guess what? It's Dr. Simmons, right? This is amazing, right? So I've never been named, right? No one has ever called me that. So I'm cribbing notes here. So talk to us about leadership, how it's evolved over your career, and how you think about it today.
Well, first of all, I want to compliment you on your purple sneakers.
Oh, I wear them every day.
Very impressive. Everybody's identity and style I think arises from so many different factors, and certainly that's true for me. I started out in a small town in East Texas that was deep in segregation. And as a child, I learned about the walls that are created that artificially divide us. I also learned that withholding certain resources from children could have a very deleterious effect. And so out of that morass came this stubborn insistence within me somehow, even as a child, that had to be fixed. And so I think what motivated me when I started my career was figuring out a way where I could have some impact, just even a fraction of an impact on the isolation that we will ourselves. on the biases that we harbor, on the ways in which we prevent ourselves from true learning. And so when I started out, I was very preachy, very.
I'm listening.
And I must say, I didn't do very well. I noticed that people were rolling their eyes, and shuffling their feet and thinking, oh my God, here she goes again. And I realized early enough that, of course, people were not listening to me and that I would never have an impact if I persisted in the way that I was going. And then somehow it occurred to me that, I need to listen to other people. And I need to factor in their different views. But I not only need to do that, but I need to show that I'm doing that somehow. Because without that inclusive movement, people are likely to push away your ideas. And so I learned that early on, and once I adjusted myself to doing that, things went somewhat better for me. But I must say, not completely better, because I would say even up to the moment right before I became president of Smith, I was pretty insufferable. Everybody will tell you I was. And because I was on a campaign to improve university life. And I was quite passionate about what needed to happen to do that. And so at the time I started, for example, when I started at Princeton, there were almost no minority faculty at Princeton. And so the loneliness of that really caused me to think I had a double responsibility. And so I started pushing very hard for changes at Princeton that would make a difference to the students and to the university. Princeton was even then a great university, but it was not nearly as great as it could have been. But they couldn't see that in that moment. And so I wanted to convince them, or rather show them, how beautiful life could be for Princeton if they only opened up to the diversity available to them. And so I set out to recruit faculty and decided that my first recruit was Toni Morrison. And the reason I focused on Toni Morrison is because I thought that I couldn't convince people of of the vision I had, but I could show them. And when I asked myself who was best able to show the brilliance of African American art and culture, I thought Toni Morrison could do that. And so when she came to Princeton, it was almost, it was quite extraordinary. Because as soon as she got there, she won the Pulitzer, and then she won the Nobel Prize. And suddenly, Princeton started looking at itself differently because of that. So all of that is to say, I learned to keep my mouth shut sometimes, and instead to try to demonstrate through my leadership what was possible if we did sensible things that opened up our world more and invited difference into it and enabled us to be better at what we did.
Well, it sounds like the sound strategy that evolved over time. Listening, gathering the perspectives of others, understanding the lay of the land, and then doing something about it.
Yes.
And demonstrating the impact of the moment, but what's possible moving forward. Yeah, that's great. Very well said. You've talked about the extraordinary mentors you've had over your career. Can you tell us about one or two of them and what made them so impactful? Because I think about the unique role that we as educators have to mentor the next generation of learners and scholars and citizens that are going to make societies, whether it's locally or globally, flourish in ways that is needed now more than ever. Sometimes that starts with mentorship.
It is, but I personally view mentorship as having many flavors and colors. And I also believe that mentorship is not always intentional. Some of the best mentors I've had were the worst people that I've encountered. Does that seem odd?
I guess you learned from them.
Yeah. So I have had loving mentors who have done so much for me in putting on my path things that I never would have thought I could do. And certainly as a young person, mostly that was teachers. My best mentor was my mother, of course, but my teachers throughout school did that for me. But when I became, that's number one. Number two, when I was a graduate student, nobody believed that I could be successful in my field. Here was a black girl studying Romance languages and literatures. I had no business doing that. Even my professors thought that at Harvard. And so the whole notion that I was at odds with the status quo, that I would not be able to make progress in the way that my peers would be able to do it, because it just was not suitable for me to be studying French. And I would say that all of the people who discouraged me from studying French are responsible for my success. Because, of course, sometimes the best thing you can do to spur people on is to tell them they can't do something, or to try to define them in ways that they don't want you to define them. And so people wanted to define me as somebody who needed to do utilitarian things, and certainly not an esoteric subject like French literature, because after all, the world needed me to be a lawyer or a sociologist or something like that. And how could I be so irresponsible as to study French? Well, that spurred me to demonstrate how useful French could be. And so that's been one of the best decisions that I've made. I will say that I had a boss at Princeton who, my position at Princeton as a dean was to do faculty appointments and faculty salaries, and I did a spreadsheet for him once and took it to him, and he looked at it and said it was the worst thing he'd ever seen. And to demonstrate how disgusted he was with my work, he kicked the file cabinet. It was terrifying. He was a very big man, a physicist, and the whole campus feared him. And we were there after hours, and I was terrified. And he just flew into a rage about how horrible my work was. But then, after all, when I was coming along, it was the chosen path for most people to infantilize blacks, to pat us on the back and to say how wonderful we were, and never to support us behind the scenes. And that was the way things were done. Nobody ever told you that your work was awful, ever. And yet here was a man who told me my work was terrible. And that was the best gift in many ways that I ever got. Because I went back to work and I did it better, and I got better because he told me how bad it was. I often say to my students, if you are in a class with a professor who's telling you how great you are, drop the class and go and find somebody who's going to tell you what you need to do to improve. Well, this very professor turned out to be the one who convinced me to become a university president. That same person.
Wow.
Yeah, Aaron Lemonick, who
Is his foot okay?
yeah.
He was okay.
But he was a fierce, everybody feared him, all the faculty feared him. And they feared him because he was very outspoken, and he dominated. And he's one of the people who built the modern Princeton because he was a guard at the gate. And every time he saw a weak faculty position, he would turn it down. Or he'd call a department and say, I've gotten your recommendation for this person. I want to know who they're sleeping with in your department because they can't be serious about this appointment. Yeah, that's what he was like. So,
You never know what you're going to get, people.
so he was a fierce promoter of excellence. And I learned a lot from him, though it was a challenge working for him.
Yeah. Well, certainly, that the promotion of the fierceness of quality, learning, character, lessons that undoubtedly, given your success as a president, resonated. Unfortunately, other presidents, as we look across the higher education landscape today, are having a lot of challenges. In the last 10 years, over 115 universities have shuttered their doors or been merged into a different entity, meaning there's something about the value proposition or the attention to quality that isn't resonating in the marketplace. And I think that causes all of us to take a deep breath and to try to understand what more must higher education do to ensure its sustainability. We're actually having that conversation on campus right now. We're in the process of really finishing up our all-new decadal strategic plan as we look ahead. And fortunately, we've been listening to people. Over 10,000 Horned Frogs, or people that care about, have touched this plan in some way. Over 200 active faculty and staff on committees, and working really, really hard over the course of the year to put together, through an inclusive process, a vision that really represents all of us. So I feel good about the forward trajectory and the sustainability of this enterprise, but so many others are not finding their way. You take a global view of higher education. You've seen big universities and small universities and public universities and private universities. What would your advice be to some of these presidents that are struggling?
Well, I think it's understandable in any superannuated effort that people lose touch with what their task is, au fond, as they say in French. And what I mean by that is, education is just the best possible resource we can have in the world. It really is. But why can't we explain that in a way that people understand? Why can't we? I think it's because we have a gap has arisen between the public and us. Now, what are some of the things that we've done? First of all, we have created an environment in which we tout certain institutions as elite and others as not. We fueled an arms race among institutions to try to get to that pinnacle where you accept the fewest number of students, you have the most money, and you have people vying to get in. And then, by contrast, you dismiss the importance of other institutions, and so on. I remember when I was president of Brown, for years, when I met with the other Ivy League presidents, I would insist that we needed to reserve spaces for community college students. I had no luck with that at all, none. But I argued that the reason we should do that is because education fundamentally ought to be a continuum. You can start here and go there and go over here. It doesn't matter. It's the learning that matters. And wherever you're sitting, wherever you're studying, that has value. That's the proposition we have not convinced the public that we believe. And they are distrustful of us because how many of them get to experience the so-called elite realm? Very few, right? Secondly, we're so enamored with ourselves that we have learned to talk in the most abstruse ways about what we do. Who understands what we say? Honestly. So I'm often saying to scholars, you can talk that way to each other. But when you talk about what you're doing, when you talk about the work that we do in education, talk in ways that people, in plain English, that people can understand. So we've got to become much more apt in narrowing the chasm between us and the public, because they are making us pay dearly now. I was at Harvard during the meltdown in the fall, and to see the concerted action of people riding through Harvard Yard with box trucks, messages against the university. And when I had to go in to meet with the president of Harvard, Harvard Yard was closed, locked up, and I had to stand at the gate and call somebody to come out and let me in, okay? And so we haven't seen the worst of it yet. The worst of it is coming when we do not find a way to make overtures to populations that deserve a chance at education. One of the reasons I wrote my book was to say just fundamentally something that I think universities have lost sight of, as have other schools, and that is you could have a child in the poorest section of the city or in a rural area. You don't know what their potential is until you begin to invest in it and discover the capacity that that child has. And so I like to remind people that when I grew up, I was poor, I was ugly, I was unworthy, I would never be anything because I was black. That was my reality. That's what I was born into, and that's the way I grew up. And yet, people came along, educators came along, and said something different to me. And they said, you're smart. You can do things. You can be somebody one day. The world will change. I couldn't see that as a child, but they could see it. And so we succeed most when we are working with those category of students, okay? And so the scandal that some universities were involved in recently with regard to getting students in through nefarious means, that doesn't help us. The scandals of the failures of leadership of presidents, for example, that doesn't help anybody. The restrictions on campus where you can't say anything and you have to be a certain thing, that doesn't help anybody. And so I think we have to get on our knees and have a come to Jesus moment in this profession and ask ourselves solidly, How can we be of the people? How can we demonstrate what we do of worth? And how can we bring people back to us? And without that, I think it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, well, I love that notion, and I'll give you a sneak preview, and I'd love to get your comment on it. Our strategic plan isn't finalized, but it's on the 5-yard line. We love football here, so I'm going to use that analogy. And one of the 4 pillars is simply titled community engagement. We're still thinking through all the ways we can effectuate that. But if you were, president of Texas Christian University, or you were the dean, maybe specifically of a college of education, what strategies and tactics and techniques and tools would you be thinking about to really partner with the community to not only strengthen it, but to put our students in a position of understanding the opportunities they have as they build a career in the context of life?
Well, I'd certainly be in the community all the time, because there doesn't need to be a red line between universities and the communities they serve. And that means that in all the formal ways that policymakers behave, policymakers at the university ought to be engaging with policymakers outside the university on a routine basis. But more importantly, when that happens, the public has to be aware that it's happening. So much of what we do in universities, people don't even know anything about. But we have to be very open in saying, here is what we're doing. The venues on university campuses are ideal for community efforts. Making a venue like this available, oh my goodness, what a statement that is to a community when you do that. Having students come before they are college ready is very important. I heard about some of the programs that you're doing here that seems just right for communicating that message. Expanding that is, I think, very important. And finally, students committing to working in the community. People know us from our students. What are our students like? Do they care about what's going on in their community? And are they willing to engage with the community? And so I think if you have a formal program for students to do that, that's all to the good. But it's obviously a complex of opportunities and programs that you do to make sure that at every level of the university, you're engaging with the community.
Well, I think that's well said. We have a few great programs, as you've mentioned, where we are practicing service learning. We are showing the power of a well-educated college graduate. We are in many ways positioning them to not only learn and contribute, but to be ambassadors and to better tell our story.
Absolutely.
In a way that hopefully will resonate, as we hope that other constituencies, external constituencies, will go with us. And so I'm very proud of our community for coming to that. You don't
Yes.
always see that as a pillar. Sometimes you see we're going to teach a little bit better, or we're going to up our scholarship, or maybe our service is going to get more efficient.
Right.
But for the courage of this community to prioritize that and to see that's part of our values. TCU prides itself on being a values-driven university. We think that's what's got us here to this point. We have values such as engagement and community, it turns out, and we have integrity and excellence. What have you seen from a values perspective at other universities? What's really worked, or what values have you tried to bring through your leadership over the years?
Well, I suppose I focus most on helping people understand how vital it is to our communities, to the country, and to our campuses for everybody to respect everybody else. And I've been very strident in my statements about how necessary it is in a community for everybody to buy into the obligation to respect everybody's humanity, respected across differences of opinion, across differences of lifestyle and belief, across every element of human difference. The fundamental thing that you want is for people to respect human beings. So when I was at Brown, and we would have hosting day where students would come to decide where they wanted to go to college, I would always give a talk to the prospective students, and I'd say, if you do not wish to share who you are with others, please don't come to Brown. If you do not wish to respect people who are different from you, please don't come here. If you do not wish to explain to people who you are, to engage with people, please don't come to Brown. So I had a long list of things that I insisted that they ought to think about before coming, and that if they weren't prepared to do that work of respecting other people and being a member of the community and subjugating their own interests to the interests of the community, go someplace else, I said, especially go on to Harvard. That's where you belong. And I found that enormously beneficial to set the stage, because it's all overstated, of course, but they remember it vividly in the course of their time. And mostly they remember where they are not going to get any sympathy or any help when they transgress. We are, after all, communities of learning. And what is most beneficial in a community of learning is that if you have stuff to learn, okay? Not here's what I want to believe and I want all of this to be upheld. No. It's when you come to a place where you're discovering something that is different from what you might otherwise have known, and hearing from people who are saying terrible things that you don't like and that you really have to argue with. What kind of learning are you doing if you don't encounter that? I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. And so setting the stage like that is very important, because one of the things that it does is it gets you out of trouble with all those people out there who think that it's a sham what we do, right? That we're just congratulating each other. That's what we do. And so setting out some very visible terms. I love the book, the history that I had a chance to review briefly about the values, because it seems to me the farther you get away from your founding principles, the more trouble you get into. Okay, now many of our founding principles are difficult to manage through because we have a complicated history. And so I remember I was invited to go up to the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia, which Benjamin Franklin founded, and they took me into the vault, and I was able to see the notations in the margins when the Constitutional Convention, when the country was being formed, okay? and all the differences of opinion that they were fighting about and wondering, what kind of country are they going to be able to put together. We still shouldn't get too far from the founding principles, although we know that many of the things that they were focused on were already problematic because they didn't include women in that. They didn't include anybody other than white males in their vision. But so what? Fundamentally, that's the nature of principles. Au fond, they're sound, okay? If you can purify them by evolving to a place where you correct for what you missed, you still have the right principles. So hold those and interpret those as time goes on, as you need to, but have a higher purpose.
Well, I think we're going to be leaning into those purpose-driven values here, regardless of what the future holds. It's hard to go a day without reading a headline about technology, artificial intelligence, pros and cons, machine learning, deep learning. Pick your buzzword. How do you think about technology? How can it be used to the benefit of higher education, and what are the traps or the potential shortfalls?
Well, the first and most important thing is not to treat it like a deity. It is utilitarian, and it can be used to improve greatly on what we're doing and enhancing the life that we have. But it also has to be kept in appropriate measure. And some of the things that are going on now obviously result in the fact that it's getting ahead of us. We're not prepared for it. And because we're not prepared for it, we don't know how to anticipate it. So it's destroying and distorting whole professions. My son is a musician. People in the art world are terrified of what is happening with regard to the ownership of their creativity, as well they should be. And whether it's film or I was just at the White House with Spike Lee and Steven Spielberg, and the whole notion of the great works that they have produced in film that can now be produced in a very different way. They are very, very worried about the future. But finally, we're coming to terms with policymaking, and that is getting started. But every time there's a new frontier, we are late to the policies, right? I remember when Bitcoin came along. No policy whatsoever. It's all way out there, and it's going crazy. And the Fed is in Washington, and they have not even taken up what they're going to do about Bitcoin. So that's the nature of the leading edge, is it's always leading you. But you do have to gain control of it. Now, technology is extremely important. We are not these thinking beings for nothing. Our greatest asset and our greatest liability is our brain. That means that there are things that we are able to do that will push us to farther and farther out into into frontiers. That's just going to happen. We've got to make sure that we don't destroy ourselves in the mix by pushing without the human part of it. And that's why I'm so worried about the antidote to this leading edge, which is our humanity. What do we understand about our humanity? What about our look back through history? What about philosophy? What about all of the ways? What about language and the ways that we relate to each other? I've always been taken with the fact that E.O. Wilson in his book, The Meaning of Existence, makes this point poignantly, and that is that human beings were gifted with greater intelligence than in any other living form. And yet we have failed to do some of the basic things that lower form organisms can do, because we are not paying attention to that. So you don't see human beings cooperating the way that ants do, for example, right? So we've got to pay attention to everything, and my biggest concern is that our focus on technology takes us all the way to focus on technology and ignore the things that will really save us in the end, and that is our humanity and who we are and how we relate to each other and how we work together in cooperation. That is going to be the thing that we need to figure out.
Well, as I look in, yeah. Well, as I look at, out into this beautiful venue, and I see so many future educators who have the opportunity to instill that humanity, right, in the next generation of us.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for them as they embark on that bold adventure?
Well, it would be remiss of me if I didn't say that for anybody who is involved in education, to know the power of education and to have the extraordinary opportunity to bring that to people all over the world is such an extraordinary opportunity, it seems to me. Educators are the most important people in the world. And yet, one often thinks that educators don't understand that they are. How can anybody beat you down and make you feel less than when you know the power of education? How is that possible? How is it possible? And so I think the most important thing is to embrace the power of education, to know that you're going to reach people who otherwise would never flourish without your intervention, to know that you're holding the world up, frankly, by fighting for knowledge and fighting for the opportunity for everybody to be educated. I don't know. I feel like a gladiator sometimes, really. And I have been knighted by the French, by the way. And so I do carry a sword. But what? Oh my goodness! What a thing! When I got ready to go to college, I didn't have any money. My family didn't have any money. One of my teachers invited me over to her house to help her clean. And so I went over to her house, and of course this was a ruse. She invited me into her closet, and she took clothes out of her closet and packed a bag for me to go to college. Now, today, here's the thing that educators have to remember. Today, as old as I am, and of all the things that I've been able to do in my life, including Monday being in the Oval Office with the president and getting an award from him, of all the things I think about that, okay? Yeah. As, the empowering things that educators do that make your life so much more than you could ever have anticipated. So educators ought to walk with their heads up and feeling the full power of what they do, because it is the best of what we do.
Well, I think you've empowered every one of us tonight. Yeah. we've covered so much ground. We've talked about leadership and the importance of listening. We've talked about how one demonstrates what is possible. And we've talked about mentoring, not only positive mentors, but what you can learn from others that intentionally or otherwise spur you to action. We've talked about the opportunity for leaders to lead and to understand that we have to communicate with those that can help us in the community and beyond. We've talked about technology and its opportunities and the risks that we avoid as it pertains to our inability to exercise our uniquely human characteristic, which is humanity itself. And of course, we talked about the importance and the brilliance and the opportunity to improve the world through teaching.
Through teaching.
Through teaching. Please join me in thanking Dr. Simmons for investing her time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons and President Pullin, for such an insightful and inspiring conversation. It has been a privilege to have you with us this evening, sharing your vision and wisdom for the future of education. And to all of you in attendance tonight, thank you for your support, your time, and your continued commitment to making a positive impact on education, youth, and our communities. As we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the TCU College of Education, I am filled with hope and excitement for what lies ahead. Our mission has always been to shape the next generation of educators, leaders, and change makers. But beyond that, we are committed to fostering an environment where curiosity, compassion, and innovation can thrive, because these are the foundations that will drive meaningful changes in our schools, in our communities, and in society at large. Tonight is not just about reflecting on the past, it's about looking forward, whether through groundbreaking research, partnerships that strengthen communities, or programs that prepare our youth for a brighter future. Together, we have the power to continue transforming education and making a lasting impact. Thank you.